May the name of the Lord be glorified. I want to thank the Lord for giving me another chance to stand before His people to share His word. Now, I ask for your prayer tonight. This was a very tough week for us as a family. As many of you know, my uncle, Kunuan uncle from Tampa, had come down for his lung cancer surgery. And so we've been trying to help him and support him. He had his surgery on Thursday. He did very well. He's still in the hospital. We hope that he'll go home maybe in the next day or so. But he is recovering. He's still in quite a bit of pain. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in relation to the passage that we are going to study. But I do ask for your grace and your prayers because this has been a very difficult week. We have been studying the book of Mark, Gospel of Mark. So we are going to continue our journey in that book. I've told you before, and I've said it before. This is a precious book to me. It is my favorite gospel. I like it so much, I named my son out of it. I said, I named my son after it. It really is a gospel that really speaks to me. It is quick. It is fast-paced. It hits all the highlights of Christ's ministry on this earth. And you can't help but read the Gospel of Mark and not walk away with a sense of the immediacy, the relevancy, and the absolute connection that Christ made to the people on this earth, the connection that he makes to you and to me. And that actually is the main theme of the passage I want to talk about today. So we've been working our way through the Gospel of Mark. It's been a little bit slow, but I want to make sure we hit every point. I will tell you, to me, reading through this gospel and ministering on it is like going into a mine and trying to find that diamond. You have to dig, you have to dig, you have to dig, you have to dig. And sometimes you're going to find a gem. Sometimes you may find a rock that needs a little bit of work. It needs to be polished. Well, today's one of those days. Okay. The passage that I want to talk about is in the Gospel of Mark chapter 3, and we're going to read from verses 7 to verse 19. The Gospel of Mark chapter 3, and we are going to read from verse 7 to 19. 3, 7 to 19. Read with me. Now, as you read this passage, you may think there's nothing here. This is a bridge passage. It's just connecting one, story to the next. And as we spoke about at the last time I spoke on this, in the first part of Gospel of Mark chapter 3, we had that amazing showdown between Jesus and the Pharisees and the whole controversy about healing on the Sabbath. He brought a man with a withered hand forward, and he said, is it lawful on verse 4? It says, is it lawful on the Sabbath to good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? Putting the corrupted hearts of the Pharisees on trial. And then he brought to attention the fact that it is more important to save a life than to strictly follow a rule without a true intent of heart. So after this amazing confrontation between Jesus and the Pharisees, we now go to verse 7. Actually, let me start with verse 6 because you need the context to connect verse 7. So verse 6 says, Then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him how they might destroy him. Verse 7, But Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea and beyond the Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude. When they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. So he told his disciples that a small boat should be kept ready for him because of the multitude, lest they should crush him. For he healed many, so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him to touch him. And the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, fell down before him and cried out, saying, You are the Son of God. But he sternly warned them that they should not make him known. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted, and they came to him. Then he appointed 12, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out demons. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him, and they went into a house. And the Lord bless the reading of his word. Now, on initial pass on this passage, you may say, okay, I don't see any major doctrine here. I don't see any major, things that you can spend, a half an hour talking about. Guess what? I found a half an hour's worth of things here, at least, to talk about. Every word, every jot, every tittle of the word is put there for a reason, and it has relevance to our daily lives. There's nothing wasted in the word of God. And this passage brought that out to me, and I'll explain why. The last time I spoke on the book of Mark, I think it was about a month ago. And that's when I spoke about the first part of chapter 3. And that was a great passage. There's a lot in verse 1 to 6. You have a lot you can talk about. I knew verses 7 to 19 were coming up, and I've been reading 7 to 19 over and over and over again, and I was like, how am I going to make a message out of this? Well, it came. The Spirit came, and I have a message to share with you today. So here we have the setting. Now, walk with me with this. Like I said, this is so exciting. So we have this confrontation in the synagogue. Jesus against the Pharisees, and he puts the Pharisees in their place. He shows their hypocrisy, showing that they are not willing to do anything on the Sabbath if it might violate the Sabbath, even if it's to save a life. Now, with that hatred in their heart, with that animosity in their being, they go out to plot against Jesus. And so they go and they form a pact with the Herodians. Now, the Herodians were their arch enemies. If you have today, you have the Republicans and the Democrats. These are like the Republicans and the Democrats getting together to say, we have a common enemy. I don't know that that's going to happen today after this election, but here we have the Pharisees and the Herodians getting together. And this is amazing. Brothers and sisters, look at Jesus' reaction to their plotting. Rather than confronting them, rather than going right after them, which he could, and he does at some point, he withdraws. Verse 7, but Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude followed after him. Now look at where the multitude comes from. If you have a map of the land of Judea in front of you, and then look at the places that are mentioned, the multitude came from Galilee, they came from Judea, they came from Jerusalem, Idumea, Jordan, Tyre, and Sidon. Mark is basically saying that they're coming to Jesus from every direction. Tyre and Sidon is north of Galilee. Idumea and Judea are south of Galilee. The land beyond the Jordan is to the east of them. And as you all know, Sea of Galilee was situated very close to the Mediterranean Sea itself. So from every direction, the people are coming. Now remember, Jesus was withdrawing. He was withdrawing from the Pharisees and the Herodians because it wasn't the time to confront them. He needed some time for the hostilities to go down. And that's a very important sort of point for us. Sometimes as Christians, we feel the need that when we are faced with hostility, that we need to meet it with hostility. Actually, in the Word, that's never been, in Christ's ministry on earth, he never met hostility with hostility. Either he approached a hostile crowd or hostile person with love and understanding, like he did with the woman who was being stoned, or he withdrew, because he understood that his message was not to fight battles, but to show forgiveness, to show that he was the Prince of Peace, to share that he brought a sense of love to this earth. So you have all these people coming. And so the question, and then the title of my message is, to be with him. Because both of these passages, 7 to 12 and 13 to 19, have to do with being with Jesus. So if the Herodians and the Pharisees are clearly plotting, here you have the leaders of the society plotting against Jesus, why was the multitude coming after him? Look at the passage and look at the type of people that are coming after Jesus. Why were these people, this great multitude, coming from the north, from the south, from the east, and from the west? Why were these people coming to Jesus? Well, let's read about it. Verse 9, so he told, well, it was a great crowd. So verse 9 says, so he told his disciples that a small boat should be kept ready for him because of the multitude. There were so many people there that they were coming up after him. They were crushing him. Who were these people? Who were these people that were coming at him in such a multitude that the press of the humanity put his life at risk? Well, verse 10. For he healed many, so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him to touch him. Brothers and sisters, when you have an urgent need, and you need that need addressed, that especially if it's a physical need, and you know that if you go to this person or you go to this institution and they will give you relief, what is going to stop you from going there? These people were afflicted. These people had sicknesses. They had physical, mental, spiritual problems. And they knew, because of what they had heard, that Jesus Christ was the only answer to their problem. Guess what? They didn't go to the Pharisees. They didn't go to the Herodians. They didn't go to the leaders of the society. Many people in our society want to look to the Republicans or they want to look to the Democrats. They want to find some hope in them. But brothers and sisters, the only answer to our problems on this earth is in Jesus Christ. If I were to tell you right now that Jesus Christ, in person, in the flesh, was going to be here, what is the crush of humanity that we would expect? We couldn't keep the people here. We have many people in our circles, in our own assembly, that are struggling, that are suffering from physical ailment, not to mention psychological, spiritual, all kinds of afflictions that only some people suffer in silence. But if you knew that there was somebody that you could go to just touch the hem of his garment, right? For he healed many, so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him just to touch him. They didn't want to necessarily say anything to him. They didn't want to necessarily have him say anything to them. All they wanted to do was just to touch him, such that the crush of humanity had to have him have a boat so that he can come off the ocean a little, come off the shore a little bit, so that he could be kept safe. If you knew that all you had to do was, let me take an example here. Let's say that I have this bottle of water. Okay? I have this bottle of water right here. And this bottle of water, if you drink one drop of this bottle of water, it will solve every one of your problems. It'll heal you of your sicknesses. It'll heal you of your depression. It will heal you of your family problems, anything. It'll take care of it. How much would you pay me for this bottle of water? There is no cost on this earth, right? You would sell everything to get this bottle. That's what the people had, right? They had a need. They had a need that was urgent, that was desperate, and that had only one answer. And that answer was in Jesus Christ. At the end of September, my uncle in Tampa, got admitted to the hospital because he was having some confusion and some difficulty thinking clearly. So they admitted him to the hospital and they started doing the workup to figure out what had happened. And they realized that he had a small stroke. Okay. He had what they call a TIA, which some of you may know is a fairly minor stroke. One that, he basically has completely recovered from. But of course, then the investigation began to find out why he had this episode. And so what they did is they did a CAT scan of his chest to see if there might have been a source for a clot. I'm thinking a clot might have traveled from his lung to his brain. And lo and behold, they found not a clot, they found a tumor in his right lung, one that he didn't have any symptoms of. Now, you go into a hospital for one thing that you basically have recovered from. It's no longer a problem for you. The confusion passed, the neurological symptoms have gotten better. But you find another problem. And guess what? It's a much, much, much more difficult problem. Okay? Can you imagine the urgency in his heart and in his loved ones' hearts? Right? They're not going to say at that point, we didn't really care about the lung. We were just looking for a cause for the stroke. We're not going to worry about this tumor. Let's leave it alone and, let's see what happens. Obviously, that would be, malpractice. That would be a silly way to approach the situation. All of a sudden, there's a problem that we didn't know it was there. It has been revealed to us by the grace of God. And now everything is now focused on this one problem. There is an urgency that must be satisfied. And whose urgency is it? Let me ask you a very honest question. There's nobody that I see right now that's, outside of me and many that's on the phone that really are related to Uncle, Kunyuman Uncle. Many of you don't know who he is. Do you have any urgency in your heart to take care of this problem? No, because it's not your problem. Do you think I had an urgency in my heart? Yes, because it's my uncle. Do you think Uncle had an urgency in his heart? He had the most urgent. It was an affliction that had been with him for many, many years. And so there had to be a way to manage it. And so waiting was not an option. And so the workup began immediately. PET scan, blood work, MRI of the brain, everything being done. Biopsy, all done within 2 weeks so that we can get an answer as to what's going on. Nobody was going to wait on this. And here it is. His first CAT scan was done the first week of October. Here we are, the second week of November. He's had the tumor taken out. Urgency, a sense of immediacy, a sense of how relevant your affliction is to you. Now, if this was your father or if this was your mother, how would you behave? If you knew that you could go to this man and all you had to do was touch him. All you had to do was touch the hem of his garment and your problem would be solved. What lengths would you go to get to that man? Yeah, you'd crush him. You'd push him right into the ocean if that's what you'd push 10 people in front of you into the ocean to get to him because there's an urgency that only you understand and that he can solve. For he healed many so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him to touch him, to be with him. Brothers and sisters, some of you may be sitting there today or tonight on Zoom. You may be thinking to yourselves, oh, I don't have any affliction like that. I don't have any urgency. Brothers and sisters, we all have that urgency. We may have buried it deep, but there is only one answer to the problem of life, and that is Jesus Christ. So the question you need to ask, and I'm going to ask in a very serious and convicting way today, is why isn't there an urgency in your heart to seek after the things of God? Why isn't there an urgency for you to investigate the word, to fall on your knees in humble prayer to the God of heaven who can solve your problem? That's what we all need. I need it. You need it. This assembly needs it. This community needs it. This country needs it. We all need to know the urgency of the need of our heart and the solution to that urgency and that need, the affliction. The only solution is Jesus Christ. It's funny, right? It goes on in verses 11 and 12. And the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, fell down before him and cried out, saying, "You are the Son of God." But he sternly warned them that they should not make him known. There's 2 points I want to make in those 2 verses. Point number 1, some of these people who were afflicted with demons. Do we still have demons today? 100% the answer is yes. If you think that demons don't exist, and by corollary the Satan doesn't exist, then you've lost half the battle already. Satan's greatest victory on this earth is to make people believe that he doesn't exist. You know, it's funny. If you ask 100 people, do you believe in God? I would imagine about 80 to 90% of them are going to say, yes, I believe in God. But if you ask the same 100 people, do you believe in Satan? I would say that number drops dramatically, and it's probably closer to around 30 to 40%. Ever ask the question why? It's because if you don't know that Satan is after you, if you don't know that the danger exists, then you are susceptible to falling prey to that danger. So you can imagine, here are these people all afflicted by these demons. They've realized they have a problem. They realize that the only solution to the problem is to come to the Son of God. So what do the demons say? They recognize him. You are the Son of God. Now, is that salvation for the demons? By recognizing that he is the Son of God? No. They're just declaring truth. They're not acknowledging anything more than what is obviously true. And that's an important point to make. Acknowledging that God exists is not salvation. Acknowledging that Jesus Christ is the Son of God is not salvation. Let me say that again. Acknowledging that Jesus Christ is the Son of God is not salvation. Salvation is the acceptance of his blood on your behalf to pay the penalty of your sin so that you can have access to heaven. It's not just a mere recognition of the fact that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, but that as the Son of God, he was the perfect sacrifice for your penalty. And that's why he sternly warned the demons. You may ask the question, why would you shut up somebody who's saying that you are the Son of God? Because it was not the right witness. An evil witness is still an evil witness. It is not said in a way to promote salvation or to promote the gospel. If anything, it was to drive the demon away from the Son of God. It was just a mere reaction in fear and trembling, as we all should. But the point that I want to make is that our afflictions are not all physical. Some of our afflictions are spiritual, and they are fought on a spiritual plane. It is spiritual warfare. So brothers and sisters, do not neglect the tools of spiritual warfare as we read in Ephesians chapter 6. We do need to take the sword of the Spirit. We need to take the word of God and rightly divide it as an approved workman unto him and fight this battle. Because that is the only way some of our illnesses, some of our afflictions, some of our worst troubles will be taken away. Let's keep going. I'm running short already. Verse 13. This is wonderful. You know, this just sounds, you usually read this, you teach it to your children as a passage that talks about the 12 apostles and sort of who they are. You know, some of us know some songs. I know Minnie teaches, and I think Bilsey teaches a song on how to remember who the apostles were. I forgot the song. I can't name all 12 apostles. I have to read the passage. But there is more than just a description of who the apostles are. Let's read this again and point out, again, like I said, we're miners deep in the mine looking for gems of truth, okay? Verse 13, and he went up on the mountain and called to him. Who did he call to him? Those he himself wanted. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who was just described in 2 verses ago, the Son of God, called who he wanted. And they came to him. Brothers and sisters, you are wanted. And who are you wanted by? Are you wanted by the police? If you are, maybe you don't belong here. Okay? No, you are wanted by the Son of God. You are wanted by Jesus Christ, the Savior of humanity. And if you come to him, those that he himself has wanted, he can give you freedom from your affliction, healing from your suffering. He can take away the pain. You know what? I am not promising physical healing. I can't do that. You know, in our doctrine and our way of thinking of things, I can't promise that. God has the ability, God has the will to do that if he so desires. But no matter what your physical situation may be, Spiritual healing is always available to you because he wants you to be with him. He called to them those he himself wanted. We are those people. We are the wanted by the Son of God, and they came to him. Now, it makes it sound like he just only called 12 people, but that's not the phrasing that you read here. He didn't call just 12 people. There were a bunch of people that he called. And actually, the number is not there because guess what? He's still calling us. And the number will continue to grow. There are so many that he calls to himself, and many that will come to him. Now, among those that have come to him, he appointed 12. And why did he appoint 12? Well, there are three things that we see that the 12 apostles were given responsibility for. Verse 14, that they might be with him, that he might send them out to preach, and that they might have power to heal sicknesses and to cast out demons. You see there not only three responsibilities, but a stepwise progression of how a child of God grows in the faith after salvation. After you have been called by Jesus Christ, after you come to him, the first thing you have to do is what? What's the first thing that they were called to do? To be with him. To be with him. You know, if you want to learn how an oncologist works, how do you learn? Do you go read it in a book? If I read everything I knew about oncology, does that make me a good oncologist? You need to be with someone who's been an oncologist. You need to actually be with the person who's going to give you the experience and the wisdom necessary to solve the problems that may face you. We have, I've been an oncologist now for more than I care to say, 15, 16 years now. And we have a new fellow that we just hired. So she just finished her training. She, finished medical school. She's done 3 years of residency. She's done 3 years of fellowship. So, she's been in training for a long time. But she just started to practice. And I will tell you, every patient she comes and asks me questions on. Now, I can be mean and just say, hey, you're an oncologist. You have an MD after you. You have a certification. Why should I share? You go take care of it. She understands that knowing the fact is not the same as putting it into practice. And so the first thing that you need to do on your walk with Christ is to merely just spend time with him. How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, you have to spend time in prayer. You got to pray to the Christ who wanted you and called you and to whom you came. Spend time with him. You can do that by reading his own word. Here's a passage that normally you would walk right past, not even pay any attention to, and it is speaking volumes of wisdom about our Christian growth. The second thing that he asks us to do is that he has to send them out, right? It's not enough just to be kind of spending time with Christ all the time. There are other people who need that same joy, who need that same healing, that same relief from their afflictions. Well, how do you do that? Well, you got to get the word out. So we are called to share the message of peace, to share the good news, to share the gospel. And when you do those two things, when you have spent time with him, and when you go out to preach the word of peace, the word of relief, the word of healing, then you get the power. You get the authority. You get the wherewithal to heal sicknesses and to cast out demons. Okay. That's a 3-step process. Okay, let's say it's like in the military. It's 3 promotions that you have to get. There's only 3, so it's not like you have private, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. There's only 3. Okay, be with him, go out and preach, and then heal and cast out demons. Okay, who's healing and casting out demons? Some of us get a little stalled along the way. Some of us are still at step 1. We really need to think about our personal spiritual growth. Because if we don't, then we can't grow as a corporate body. The assembly grows when each and every individual is in a process of growth. If you have 3 people who are doing really well in an assembly and 50 people that are going nowhere, in fact, they might be going backwards, that assembly is not thriving. That assembly is not growing. This is vital to our understanding that each of us have the responsibility and the prerogative to move forward in our Christian growth. And we know that they did. The funny thing is, verses 16 to 19 is basically a list of 12 young men, and they were young men. Christ's gospel and ministry began with a youth group. These men were in their 20s. I think the oldest person was probably Simon Peter, and he was probably in his early 30s. These young men were in their 20s. I see some young people sitting here watching on Zoom and here. These people went on to change the world. They progressed not only with being with him, not only going out to preach the word, but to have power and authority over demons and sicknesses. And we see that in the Acts of the Apostles and so on. And they so believed in the truth of the message that was given to them. They so believed in the God who had redeemed them from their affliction that they were willing to give their life. They were willing to give their life for this message. If someone came and told you that the sky is purple, okay, and that if you don't say the sky is purple, you're going to die. I'm gonna say a new law comes out saying the sky is purple. When Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were told to worship this God, this false king. When they refused, they were thrown in the fire. Let's say a law was passed like that, and I'm telling you, these days that might happen. A law is passed that obviously tells you that you have to not follow truth. Are you willing to take the consequences? Are you willing to lay down your life for what you believe to be true? These men were. I just made a list, and I'm just going to read through it really quickly of how these men ended. So you have James, the son of Zebedee, who's one of the sons of thunder. He was the first person to be martyred in AD 44. He was killed by King Herod Agrippa. Matthew, the writer of the gospel, traveled to Ethiopia. Tradition says that he was pinned to the ground and beheaded because of his message. Andrew, brother of Peter, preached in Asia, was crucified on an X-shaped cross, not a typical Latin cross, but on an X-shaped cross. Peter, as many of you know, Simon, who was given the name Peter by Jesus Christ, was crucified upside down. Bartholomew was martyred. Believe it or not, there's much of a tradition that says that he was beaten and crucified in India. That was interesting. I didn't know that. Thomas, as we all know very well, preached in Persia, in Parthia, and of course in India. And in India, he was tortured, speared, and burned. James, the son of Alphaeus, preached in Syria, where he was starved and clubbed to death because of his ministry. Simon the Zealot, also known as Simon the Canaanite, preached in Persia. And there, because he refused to sacrifice to a sun god, was martyred. John, the only person who died a natural death, but died in utter loneliness, in exile on the Isle of Patmos, as we all know. Philip preached in Greece and Syria. He was tortured and crucified. Thaddeus, also known as Jude, preached in Judea, Samaria, Libya, Lebanon, and died in Beirut. It says that the tradition says that he was pierced through with arrows. And then there's Judas Iscariot. Interesting, he has a whole verse to himself. And Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him, always known as the traitor, the one of the 12 that did not have a genuine heart of faith. The one who may have started the right way. He wanted to be with him. He may have gone out to preach. It says that they went out to preach. But he never progressed to a full understanding of the man that stood before him, the man that he spent 3.5 years with. And he is forever known as the son of perdition. Brothers and sisters, one last thing I want to mention is this Interesting phrase in verse 17. James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, the sons of thunder. This is the only place in the gospel where we hear James and John being referred to as Boanerges, the sons of thunder. What an interesting term. You know, I would imagine, and I hope you all don't mind. I'm not trying to be flip, or I'm not trying to be, you know, facetious. Hanging out with Jesus Christ must have been cool. He gave pet names to his friends. He called Simon Peter, so he called Simon a rock. You all know, some of you know Dwayne Johnson, the actor. Well, he's called the Rock, right? Why would you call someone the Rock? Because he was sturdy. He was faithful. He was firm in his understanding. He called James and John Boanerges, the sons of thunder. I'd love to call Jake and Mark the sons of thunder, but that would make me thunder, right? The sons of thunder. What a cool name. What do you think that meant? Well, I would imagine it meant something having to do with fiery enthusiasm. Two young men who were so into what they were believing, who were so on fire for Christ that they would do anything. And we see that in other places in the gospel. It says that when they came up against a group of Samaritans who were causing conflict, they asked Jesus, "Should we call fire down from heaven upon them?" That's the fire that would lead to being called the sons of thunder. Who are we talking about? We're talking about James, who was the first one to be martyred, and John, who would be the last one to live, who we now call the apostle of love. He came from being the son of thunder to becoming the apostle of love. What happened in between? He truly understood the message of salvation, the power of salvation. He understood who it was that he spent 3.5 years with. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to end there because it's already past my time. In this passage, you may read this passage, you may say it's kind of a bridge between one section to the next. I will tell you our next passage is a really exciting passage. Starts talking about another conflict that he's having with the Pharisees, talking a little bit about an unpardonable sin. So the rest of chapter 3 is really exciting. But even this little brief part from verse 7 of chapter 3 till verse 19, there are jewels of truth that I will tell you I'm cherishing. Jesus Christ wanted me. My Savior wanted me, and I came to him. And as I came to him, he gave me a mission. First, he wants me to spend time with him. Second of all, he wants me to go out and preach the word. And third, he wants me to have power and authority over demons and sicknesses. Man, if I had power over, let's just take sicknesses because demons sounds pretty daunting. But let's say I had power over sicknesses. I would be the best oncologist in the world. There would be a crush of people, a multitude of people who would come after me. I'd have to get a little boat to go off the shore a little bit. How many people are coming to you? Have you had to get a little boat to go off the shore? If not, I ask you to ask the question why. Ask yourself the question why. It doesn't matter where you are. You may only be at step 1. Maybe you just need to spend more time with him. That's okay. He's mine. He doesn't mind that. It's not when you go from one step to the next that you leave that step behind. You don't have to leave him to go out and preach the word. Let's just all start together with spending more time with him. Because guess what? He wants it. He himself wanted. And he called them to himself, the ones that he wants. And you come to him, you need to spend time with him. And as you spend time with him, it will naturally occur to you to go out and preach the word. Because guess what? You want to share this joy. You want to go out and tell others. You will not believe who I just met. I just met Jesus Christ, the healer of my soul, the one who has given me eternal life. What a precious, precious jewel of God's truth in this otherwise forgettable passage. Let us all have an urgent desire, an immediacy to study the word, to be with him, to grow in our desire to preach that word, to go out and have power and authority over the princes of this world. We can do that. Look at these 12. They did it. They changed the world. They didn't have a bachelor's degree. They didn't have a master's degree. They didn't have an MD degree. They didn't have any money. They had no pre-existing qualification to do what they did, except for the fact that they knew Jesus Christ. Hey, we can all do that. Let that be our prayer, not only for our individual lives, but for this assembly. May this assembly's prayer be that we be with him more, that we preach the word, and that we have power over demons and sicknesses.